All right, so we're here in downtown, and I'm not going to tell you guys why. Wait a minute. Are we in? We're not in downtown. Where the hell are we?
You gotta touch it, dude.
I'm fucking touching that.
You gotta touch it.
No, I'm not touching it.
Touch it with something.
Um,
Just give it a little poke.
I don't have anything to poke it with. I'll do it with my shield.
Yeah. Just a little nudge.
It's like someone's remote controlling it, right? Hey everyone, a brand new episode of Lofi Docs coming right your way. This is a very special one. I'm here as always with my good friend Johnny and my dog Artemis, who's joining us for this one. We are in Northern California, and the reason for that is we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Zodiac Killer case. This is a long in the works episode. We're really excited about it. A lot of intrigue, a lot of mystery, and it's going to be a real big meaty episode. So please check it out. Tell us what you think. Leave a like, leave a comment. Please consider subscribing if you feel so inclined, and we'll see you guys very soon. No, we're being judicial.
I am, however, recording this.
Wait, you don't have my fucking legal permission for this?
You give it!
All right, so I'm here with my co-pilot, Artemis. We're nearing the epicenter. That is San Francisco. By the way, we met up with a friend a little bit before we got into the city proper here, and we were promptly and authoritatively schooled on how to refer to San Franciscoans the correct way, using the right demonym. We can't refer to the city as San Fran. Apparently that ruffles feathers out here, and we can't call them Friscos. But we're heading into the city. We're almost there. We're probably like, I don't know, a few minutes away, but we're really excited. We got plenty of stuff to shoot, and it's gonna be a great old time. But like I mentioned, we're doing the Zodiac Killer case, and there's a lot of history in the city regarding that case, and it's just gonna be a lot. And I cannot wait, Johnny and I cannot wait to just spill all of it, let the floodgates open, and tell you guys about this really interesting, sad, depressing, scary, mysterious, thrilling, I probably used that word twice now, but it's gonna be a lot of fun. We'll see you there. I shouldn't be doing that when I drive. All right, guys, so we're here in the Presidio Heights district of San Francisco. The reason for that is this is the very site of the last officially known murder site of the Zodiac Killer. This is, again, a very upscale, well-to-do area of San Francisco now and even then. So allow me to set the scene for you. So on October the 11th, 1969, the victim in this case was Paul Stine, who was a taxi cab driver. Around 9:40 p.m. or so on that night, his taxi cab was hailed around the downtown San Francisco area, and the suspect who got into the car gave him an address that was in the Presidio Heights district of San Francisco. They reached this very area a little after 10 p.m. that night. Upon reaching the initial given address, the suspect informed Paul Stine to drive a further block. Upon reaching the further block, the suspect pulled out a gun and proceeded to shoot Paul Stine in the back of his head, killing him almost instantly. Around that very moment, 3 teenagers who were celebrating a party in that house right there, through the upstairs windows right there, proceeded then to see the suspect exit the vehicle and then wipe down the vehicle. There was blood everywhere. And the suspect rifled through Paul Stine's belongings, taking his keys and his wallet. And also, we would find out later that he was taking swatches of Paul Stine's shirt for reasons to send into to the journals and to the newspapers and to police to not only validate the crime that he had committed, but also to further substantiate the mystery and to instill more fear into the populace in general. So the three eyewitnesses saw the suspect, wiped down the taxi cab, saw his face clear as day because it's a well-lit street even at night. They have, it's a very, again, very well-to-do area. They have street lights everywhere. So they saw the suspect wipe down the taxi cab, and then after doing so, he proceeded then to walk north towards the Presidio Heights Park, which again, he was not walking fast at all. So again, let's actually walk that very path that supposedly the Zodiac walked to exit after committing this very gruesome crime. All right, guys, so we're actually now, I'm going to promise you, I'm going to show you now, we're actually going to walk the supposed direction that the suspected killer on that night walked. So after he wiped down the cab, which again was right there, right behind me, the suspect walked in this direction heading north, and that's where the eyewitnesses supposedly saw him that night, the three teenagers I mentioned, from that very window up there in that house. He walked this direction northerly in a very calm fashion. He wasn't walking briskly as they reported. He wasn't running. He didn't seem to be in any hurry despite, committing a violent crime, in this case, murder. And again, after wiping down the taxi, he was heading this direction. And what caused a lot of confusion that night was the initial all points bulletin sent to police was that they were looking for the initial report was, and it was a mistake, was they were looking for a black male. And the police, who, when we head to Jackson Street here, which is the first cross section here, on this very street, reportedly, police had seen a white male matching the description just as described by the three eyewitnesses. And they had stopped him to just ask him if they had seen someone matching a black male's description in the area looking suspicious. That gentleman, upon being asked that question, he said, "I saw someone waving a gun and running frantically that way." Almost like a cartoon, the police were like, "Thank you," and just, zoomed off. It wasn't until a short time later that the police were properly informed that they were actually looking for a white male. And it was actually on this very street, Jackson Street, right here, which I'm going to show you right now, that the gentleman, the suspect, later finding out the Zodiac Killer, walked northerly and headed into the Presidio, which is right here, a park that anyone can enter. I believe it's closed at this very moment because I think they close it after a certain time during the day. But here, Cherry and Jackson is where supposedly the Zodiac was seen on this very street before he entered the park and disappeared into the night. They never were able to find out where he went. They had a crap ton of police, cops. They had the military and the MPs here helping them search. They had floodlights drenching this entire area looking for the suspect, and were not able to find him. But anyway, let's see if the Presidio is actually open, and we'll show you some of that. It's relatively interesting. So, stunning. So we're heading into the Presidio, guys. This park is actually still open. This again might be the exact walking path that the Zodiac took that night. As you can see, this no longer, I guess, is a workable path, but right here is Presidio Heights Park, which I guess is under construction. There is, I believe still a playground called, I believe, Joseph Kahn Playground. It's been there since, I think, the 50s. And it is supposedly where the Zodiac, in a taunting letter he sent the following day after committing the act that he did the day before, that he spent the night in the Presidio, waited, well, not the night, but he spent a little bit of time there hiding from police, and supposedly he had a parked vehicle that he had parked earlier before he committed the violent crime, went to that car and took off into the night and disappeared. That's how he was able to evade police. But yeah, this is the Presidio as you see it. So it's a beautiful park that, again, I guess they're cutting down trees. I don't know why they're doing just that, but you think a park would kind of want to hold on to those. But anyway, yeah, fascinating. All right, so a day after the Paul Stein murder, in October 1969. A letter was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle and several other newspapers where Zodiac not only took credit for the Paul Stine murder that happened on October the 11th, 1969, but also sent a swatch of his shirt that he had torn off his body that night. That actually would be one of several swatches of Paul Stine's shirt that he would send to several news outlets throughout the years after Paul Stine's murder. And these taunting letters took the form of not only of his smugness, but his self-righteous hatred for police, which he referred to as pigs numerous times, but also, as he phrased it in his letters, the quote, collecting of slaves, end quote. And it sent this bustling city into a nightmarish hellscape where everyone was afraid to go out. People were just assuming everyone was the Zodiac, and it sent this city into a who's who of who did it. Everyone was accusing everyone of being the Zodiac. It became hysteria, especially when the ciphers, which were added, which were supposedly supposed to indicate his identity, which, as we know, or maybe you guys don't know, that was never found. Because, shocker or surprise, the murderer, the Zodiac, his identity has never been revealed. We still don't know who that is, despite almost 60 years past that time. Another interesting facet of the Paul Stine murder, it is this murder where Detective Armstrong and Detective Toschi entered the fray and became the lead investigators for the Paul Stine murder itself, and also Toschi became, at least for a large stretch of time, the lead investigator on the Zodiac case in general for San Francisco. And he spent many years poring over innumerable details, and even after he was removed from the case and went on and moved on with his life and even retired from the police force, he still spent a lot of his time helping Robert Graysmith, who wrote the Zodiac book in the 80s, and helping other people become sleuths themselves to try to find and uncover who the Zodiac actually was. So many people in this town, so many detectives did great work, including Toschi, who led that, to try to uncover who this mysterious killer was. All right, guys, a little bit of an Easter egg for you. Not to the Zodiac case, but actually to my own personal fear of open bodies of water. In this case, the Pacific, not specific, the Pacific Ocean, which is right behind me. Oh, is this San Francisco Bay? I think it leads into this, the same ocean. Anyway, that fear arose from the movie Jaws, which I watched when I was very young, and those docs kind of remind me of some of those, that famous scene actually where like that longshoreman, I forget who it is. Anyway, he goes out there and the dock starts to fall apart, and then the shark isn't shown, which is the case for large parts of that movie, and yeah, it terrified me. So I don't like going on boats. I get seasick. This should just become like me giving you my medical diagnoses. Another movie reference for you coming right at you, at your face, That island right over there, if you can see it, which I'm bigger than, because that is Alcatraz Island, the famous prison. Obviously no longer operational. I forget when that was discontinued, but man, you got The Rock, Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage. What other big movies happened there? I don't know, but anyway, that's Alcatraz Island right there, where one of the most famous, infamous prisons in American history was in operation, and crazy.
Escape from Alcatraz.
Escape from Alcatraz was also there. It's in the name. I think I'd know that. Okay, so we want to talk about a really scary part of the Zodiac case that happened on March 22nd, 1970 to a woman by the name of Kathleen Johns. Kathleen Johns was traveling to visit her mother in Petaluma, which I believe still, like it was then, is a farming dairy county, a lot of farmland. And she was traveling at night with her 10-month-old child, and she was also heavily pregnant. And it was nighttime, and she chose to drive at night because her 10-month-old child, she felt, was going to be more easy to travel at night because the child would be asleep. So she was traveling on the freeway, and there was a car that had approached her car and was like flashing her, indicating that they wanted to get her attention. So noticing this, she started to slow down, and on her driver's side, the person who was trying to get her attention rolled down their passenger side window and said, your tire looks loose. And this was news to her, so she pulled over to the side of the road, and the person who had indicated that to her pulled on behind her, and she came out of her car, and it was a gentleman wearing glasses, a white gentleman, and he was actually left the vehicle with a tire iron, like ready to go. And he said, yeah, it looks like your tire was a little loose there. I can fix it for you. And she said, okay, thank you. So after reluctantly agreeing to that, the gentleman went to behind the car. She wasn't able to observe what was happening because it was the tire on the backside. He was fixing the tire, or at least so she suspected. And after a few moments, he's like, there you go. You're on your way. She thanked him, got back in her car, and he drove off, and she then went on her way. And she wasn't in the car more than, I think, a few minutes, and the tire completely fell off the back part of her car. So after that happened, the gentleman who had just helped her once again stopped and said, looks like it was worse than I thought. And she said, yeah, I guess so. And I guess there maybe a quarter mile or half a mile down the road, she saw was a gas station where she would be able to receive help. And the gentleman said, I could assist you by driving you there. And since she was with her, her 10-month-old child, she thought that was a good idea. So she had given the gentleman the keys because she had gotten in the guy's car, and she had forgotten her keys and said, I'll get them for you. He grabbed her car keys from her car, turned her headlights off, pocketed her keys, and then they were on their way. So as they were driving, like I said, the nearest gas station wasn't very far, and she was supposed to be going just to that gas station. The gentleman went by it. She noticed it, but didn't say anything right away, and it was just kind of silent. No one was really saying anything. And apparently they passed a couple more, and it became it became increasingly aware to Kathleen Johns that something was amiss, and she became nervous. So after not talking for a few moments, after passing by a few gas stations, she said to the gentleman, which she didn't know his name, and said, do you always help people at night? And he said to her, and this is according to her testimony to police, she said, without looking at her, he said to her, well, when I'm done with them, they don't need any help. And she immediately became increasingly nervous, but tried to remain calm because for the sake of her child, which was in her lap. He then looked at her after saying those words and said, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to throw your baby out the window. She didn't say anything. She didn't react. But according to her, she said the reason she did it is because she thought that'd be playing into what he wanted. He wanted a reaction from her. And she decided to play it cool. She was scared out of her mind. But she decided to remain calm. So, I kid you not, she drove around with this maniac for almost 2.5 hours after that. And because he just kept driving aimlessly on the back roads of upstate California, and repeating to her several times, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, things like that. When she finally saw an opportunity that she could escape, he came to a stop he actually went up incorrectly up an exit ramp of a freeway by mistake and had to stop. And she chose that opportunity, which was smart of her, to just to remove herself from the vehicle, jumping out of the vehicle with her baby. And she went down a ravine off the nearby freeway pass there, and she hid in the underbrush there, and the car didn't move. She waited in the brush for the car to leave. A semi-truck driver happened along around that time and made that guy who had picked her up and was crazy drive off. She was then driven after requesting to go to the police station, which is, since it was so late, it was nighttime, only had one on the job officer who took down her written testimony reporting this maniac who had abducted her and her child. And as she was giving her testimony to the officer, who, by the way, was, again, it was a small town, he was actually just sort of aghast that this thing even happened. As she was describing what happened, she was just looking over, at the wall where they had wanted posters, and they had a composite sketch of the Zodiac Killer. And when she saw that, she reportedly screamed and said, "Oh my God, that's him!" And the police officer's face went ghost white. And he's like, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yes, that's the same man who I'm telling you about." And apparently the police officer got so scared himself because he was afraid the Zodiac might come back, he might attack her and him. So he decided to take her to a diner where she stayed, where I guess he knew the owner of the diner, the police officer did. She stayed where he got more police officers, and she was one of the very few people that reportedly not only was around the Zodiac, in this case hours, but was able to know what he sounded like, know what he looked like very well, because she was right next to him for nearly 3 hours in a car in the dead of night with her child. But when I learned about that, it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But she gave what she could, but she went underground after that, and because that would terrify anyone. But how horrifying would that be, right? Just to just have someone repeat something like that to you, and just to be literally a prisoner for 2.5 hours in a car that you can't escape. Terrifying.
Yeah, I wonder what that's like.
Like right now. Okay, so we're in Vallejo. I'll turn the air conditioner off. Okay, so we're here in the city of Vallejo. Johnny and I are right outside the Vallejo Police Department. I'm going to attempt to go inside and ask them if anyone can provide an official statement on the Zodiac case and or an interview, just maybe a couple questions. I doubt they'll, want to do anything like that, but we'll see. We can always just ask because we're out here. Might as well try. And fingers crossed. So let's see what they have to say. Right back. You're good, you.
So Jared's inside trying to get a interview or something with the Vallejo Police Department. I'm in the car with Jared's dog, Artemis. Come here. Hello. And I don't know how long he's going to be in here, or how long this take should be, so just going to enjoy my coffee. And wait. What do you think, Artemis? What's going on in there? He's just sitting at a little desk, a cute little chair right in front. Oh. Oh, I thought he was standing up. If I was closer, I could probably get a good shot of him in there. I guess I could zoom in on this, though. We can zoom in a little bit. A little bit. It's getting fucking hot in here. He turned the air off before he left. There we go. Oh, here he goes. I don't know how to turn it back off. There you
go. You've wet the car with your nose. I got a number. Oh.
Ooh.
Oh, I shouldn't show them the number, actually. What am I doing? I got a phone number. So, jackpot. I'm actually going to call it right now. It's hot in here. Sorry.
Your call has been forwarded to voicemail.
Another really unique aspect to the Zodiac Killer case is the inclusion of the taunting letters and all the different correspondence he would send to local journalistic newspapers. He would send ciphers, cryptograms, that on their face seemed relatively simple, but actually were surprisingly difficult to solve, with only 2 of them actually being solved of the 5 or so that he sent to newspapers locally in the area of the time. And the ciphers, when he would send them, he claimed that if solved, they would prove his identity. And with the 2 that were, they proved nothing of the sort. They're very difficult to solve, the first one being solved in 1969, and the second one only being solved in the year 2020. There are still remaining 3 cryptograms related to the Zodiac Killer case that have yet to be solved. But a completely unique facet of this case that, again, really kind of creates this enduring mystery surrounding the killer and really makes him stand out amongst a crowded time in California history where there were a lot of incredibly awful crimes happening in the 60s and 70s. But that's what makes this case really, really just fascinating, terrifying, and lasting as long as it has nearly 60 years on. All right, guys, so we are right adjoining the Vallejo Police Department grounds. And it's just really interesting as, before we leave, it's just kind of interesting to think that there are probably case files related to the Zodiac Killer case dating back to the 1960s in its inception, just merely, I don't know, feet from where we're standing right now. They have to have the killer case files in there. One of many police jurisdictions that have them, but just to think that we're so close to that official file that maybe one day we'll see when Johnny and myself come back down here and if we're invited by the police, because anyway, just interesting to think about. It'd be interesting to know, like, you know, who actively is working on the case and what that means, you know, in the department here. Like, I would assume like they have, you know, the case files from the beginning of the Zodiac crimes and all that, all the way from the 60s, just in a massive, you know, evidence locker in their department somewhere, and it's just been sitting under lock and key for decades. It probably has, like, you know, dust all over it, and they occasionally will dust off some files and be like, hey, someone was calling about it. What do you want to do about this? And they're like, nothing. But anyway, we tried. So, what can we do? Since we've been driving for a little bit now, so Lake Berryessa is by no means a hop, skip, and a jump. It is a considerable distance from, like, the San Francisco certainly, and any like surrounding suburbs. Like, to get out here, you don't by mistake get out here. You have to, you're making an point to be out here, and very hilly valley, no streetlights of any kind, no sidewalks even. So back as it relates to the Zodiac stuff, for back in September 1969, the Zodiac coming out here, this was obviously all premeditated. He came out here looking to kill, looking to find his next victim. And the fact that he decided on something that was so out in the sticks, so completely removed from anything close to city stuff is crazy to me. And again, just the commitment to want to come all the way out here on the off chance he'd find who he was looking for. Like, again, I mean, most serial killers or people that are homicidal, they'll look in areas that they're really familiar with. They'll stay like in a relatively close proximity to where they live, so that when they commit the deed, they can retreat back to a place that they know and hide. But to come all the way out here is crazy just to think about. To like commit yourself to coming all the way out here, at least an hour you're driving. You gotta it's anyway, like the winding roads and just what he was maybe thinking about as he was making his trek out here. And he was stalking people. Like, so when he came out here, eyewitnesses who were at Lake Berryessa had, reported seeing a suspicious looking man kind of like, looking at them and kind of like looking away when they would look over. He he'd park his car behind other people's, and then they would kind of like, they noticed him, and then he would like drive away or like, walk away when they just looked like, he was just out there enjoying the day. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy to think about. So one thing that Johnny and I have been observing in our trek up to Lake Berryessa is the sheer natural beauty of the surrounding landscape, the rolling hills, the wide open landscape, the sort of complete silence. There's no noise. Like when we stopped driving to make like a quick pit stop, complete silence, but it was just beautiful. But it's contrasted visually with like all these dead trees that have either been burned from what I assume is like, small fires that have sprung up, because everything here is so dry. But like, again, the sheer beauty of the place is just kind of offset by how many dead, completely just gutted, dry trees in the area. They look like melted candles, some of them. So as it relates to the Zodiac, out here it's sort of like a visualization of how beautiful this area is, but you're reminded of how horrible something was that happened back almost 60 years ago. And it kind of reminds you that even in the most beautiful of places, something so dark and scary can happen. Even in the middle of what looks like to be a small paradise. So I can't be in the sun long because I'm like a vampire, and with my skin complexion, I turn into a boiled lobster within a matter of minutes. So don't make fun of me, or well, you're gonna make fun of me regardless of what I do. I don't care. I have to do this. It's a condition, okay, guys? Seriously. All right, everyone, so here we are. Johnny and I have finally made it to Lake Berryessa proper. After our initial hiccup with the location, we actually found not the exact spot actually is behind me at that island over there. We can't get to that because there's a large body of water separating us from that. But directly behind me on September the 27th, 1969, Brian Hartnell, who was 20 years old, and his girlfriend at the time, Cecilia Shepard, who was 19, who were out here just enjoying some time away from the city. We're on that very island, just them two, just enjoying the quiet sereneness of this very, very beautiful, naturally beautiful area of California. But if I may say, before we move on with the story, the unsettling quietness of this area cannot be understated. And I think it has a lot to do with just everything that's in my mind about what happened here. I think if you were just kind of just moseying over here, enjoying your day, you would just find this to be the most serene place you've probably ever been to, short of a Buddhist temple. But knowing what happened here and just how, again, how quiet it is, it really is unsettling. But back to our story as it relates to the Zodiac. So Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were just on their picnic blanket, if you will, on that island. And there are now more trees there than I think there were before, back in the 60s where this happened, 1969. But they were enjoying sort of near the riverbank, kind of like this, which has sort of fallen away now from all the erosion from dirt. But they were just enjoying the quiet sereneness of it. And Cecilia, who was facing uphill, she had noticed a gentleman about, I would say, about 500 feet from them, peering out behind a tree. And she had commented at that time to Brian that she had seen someone, and Brian, who just assumed the gentleman was further away than she was indicating, said, well, it's fine, it's an open park, he can be anywhere he wants. And after several moments, the man came closer and was coming behind different trees, and then he disappeared from view. And Cecilia noted this and audibly mentioned this to Brian, who just assumed the guy was either going to the bathroom or was just who had left the area. And then a short time later, this very gentleman came out from behind the tree, dressed in head-to-toe regalia with a full-on hooded mask, 2 pairs of glasses, a full-on robe, gloves, would look to be like, I guess, ankle-high, or excuse me, thigh-high boots. And he was holding a gun, walking in their very direction. Cecilia noted this, mentioned this to Brian, who then sat up and noticed a gentleman approaching them. He spoke in a calm, very kind of almost monotone voice, just saying, relax everyone, please just settle down, I'm just here for your money and your car. God, it's giving me chills talking about it. So Brian, who remained calm, Cecilia was shaken up by this, obviously. They thought they were just being robbed. Brian was communicating with this gentleman at length, actually, asking him questions to sort of keep the sort of very calm, transactional, like, hey, he's here for money, let's just get this over with and he can be on his way. The suspect had mentioned that he was just trying to get to Mexico and needed a vehicle to do that. So Brian handed him his car keys, which he offered up freely, and gave him what little money he had in his pocket. And at around this time, which Brian and Cecilia thought that their nightmare would be over, the gentleman said, I need to tie you guys up. And Brian, who had mentioned that he was kind of frustrated by this, he's like, why would you tie us up? You already have what you came here for. But he felt that, he didn't say that. So Brian tied up Cecilia first. He tied her up loosely. Or rather, Cecilia tied up Brian, but she tied him very loosely. Then the suspect came over, tied up Cecilia, and then retightened Brian's constrictions. And then Brian asked the suspect, hey, is that gun really loaded? Brian was a psychology major at the time and had thought, people just bring a gun just assuming that people think it's loaded when it really isn't. The suspect actually pulled the clip from the gun, showing him a full row of bullets. and placed that clip back in the very handgun. And then what they thought was going to be the end of that, again, that nightmare, the gentleman pulled out a long knife, I believe almost 12 inches in length, and began stabbing Brian right in front of Cecilia, to her horror. And he stabbed him 8 times in his back. Brian was on his stomach as he was hogtied, stabbing him in the back 8 times. And then he proceeded to then stab Cecilia, I believe, almost 12 times in various parts of her body. She was on her back. And she was screaming, obviously. Brian was in pain. And the gentleman walked off. And he had walked over the hill from view, where they lost sight of him. And then they proceeded then to try to untie their restraints, which they were successful in doing. Brian managed to get to his feet. He was stumbling, losing a lot of blood. Cecilia was still tied up. He had loosened her bounds. And then Brian made the arduous journey back to their car, which, as me and Johnny can now attest to, is not exactly a hop, skip, and a jump back to the road. So after trialing and failing over a course of 45 or so minutes, he proceeded to, after stumbling a few times, regaining his composure, he was able to get back to his car. And they actually, before all this, I want to be clear here, a fisherman and his son had seen them bound and were screaming for help. They actually went and contacted the nearby police park rangers of this very area, who then contacted authorities proper. It took the authorities about an hour to get here. And when the authorities did get here, they noticed on Brian Hartnell's car was on the driver's side door was 3 dates, which was the date where they were stabbed, and it had the Zodiac gunshot circle insignia on it. That was obviously written by the perpetrator before he left the area. So yeah, just Brian fortunately survived his injuries. Unfortunately, Cecilia, after being taken to the hospital, succumbed to her knife wounds and died. But Brian managed to survive, and he is one of the very few survivors of the Zodiac, and one of the very few people that not only has heard his voice, but was able to have a lengthy discussion with this gentleman. Brian has been very much a part of, who's made, many instances where he's been interviewed about this, despite its very heavy and personal subject matter for himself. We actually did reach out to Brian, who has been a successful lawyer in the Northern California area, but we did not hear back. Yeah, it's just a really unsettling, even just recounting the story, it's almost kind of even hard to ascertain how that even could be something to live through, let alone survive. But in such a beautiful place nonetheless, which I would imagine for most people is just a serene place, a getaway, a vacation spot, is, again, I kind of want to get out of here. Like, even just telling the story, like just being here is just really quiet and unsettling for me and Johnny. So, yeah, that's Lake Berryessa. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, again, reading about this case, specifically this site, now coming here, being here with Johnny, it's a full circle moment that, again, you guys can ascertain this on your own just by looking at the footage we've been able to get. But again, it's a very remote area now. Back then, I would imagine probably even more so. But it's we're around the same time frame. We're in October filming this. The actual crime took place in September, so we're both in the fall season. Not many people come out here around this time of year, despite, again, it's a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. We are one of probably 10 people in this entire park. I can't even see anyone. It is just very quiet besides the random, wildlife noises. But again, the people that, the victims of that day, Brian and Cecilia, they were stalked. They were selected. And several people in the area throughout the day had reported someone acting rather suspicious, who was kind of like looking at you and then kind of ducking away. Several people had reported a suspicious gentleman in the area. And unfortunately for Brian and Cecilia, they were just happened upon by this person who had selected them after what I would appear, or what it would sound like rather, that it was premeditated stalking. He had found who he was coming here to do. And again, It is so remote out here. It is crazy that in all places of the world, it would happen in such a beautiful place like this. I just wanted to say that because again, it's eerie, it's creepy. All right, guys, so we're here in Blue Rock Springs in Vallejo, California. This park was the site of the second canonical Zodiac murder. So that took place on July the 4th, 1969. And we're actually, Johnny and I are just mapping out exactly where in the park, because it has changed somewhat since that time, although not, not in a huge way. We're just kind of mapping it out. But yeah, so we think this tree's cool though. Kind of looks like the tree from Sleepy Hollow, doesn't it? But yeah, we're trying to just map out the map here. Map out the map. So this is the map that I think, given the actual like measurements from the actual road, this is from the police. Just denoting where the body was positioned, where it was found. Yeah, this is all from police. Yeah, the car was parked. Let's go ahead, actually head over to the parking lot area. It's actually not far from where we parked our car, so. All right, everyone, so we're here in Blue Rock Springs in Vallejo, California, the site of the second canonical murder of the Zodiac Killer. Let me set the scene for you. So on July the 4th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin picked up Michael Maggiao. They were loosely, I guess you could say, dating or so. Darlene Ferrin was a couple years older, and she had picked up Mike at his house on July the 4th, nighttime, on or around, I want to say, if memory serves, around midnight. They came to this very park, which at that time was a lover's lane. It was rather in an unincorporated area of Vallejo at the time. It was unofficially known by adolescents and teenagers at the time to be a place to come and make out and, do God knows what else. So that night they came here to sort of enjoy themselves and enjoy like a quick getaway. So Darlene parked her car on and around this area facing that direction, and they apparently had been chased, although that wasn't known at the time. They apparently were being chased and pursued by an unknown person who had caused them to actually drive from Mike's house, and he trailed them, or this supposed person trailed them at various instances, and they came here to sort of lose him. And so they parked here, and they thought they were safe and they were secure, and a car had pulled up behind their car and turned their lights off. And Mike had mentioned to Darlene, he said, are we okay? And she said, listen, it's fine. Don't worry about it, sort of thing. And the car, after idling for a few moments with its lights off, actually took off and zoomed off out of the park. After a few moments, the car, the very same car that had left, came back and parked on the right side of their bumper and turned the lights off again. And that person then exited the vehicle, and with what appeared to be a makeshift flashlight was approaching their vehicle from the passenger side where Mike was sitting, because Darlene had been driving. And Mike thought it was a police officer inquiring why, two teenagers or young adults were in a park in the middle of the night. When he had looked out the window to inquire if it was an officer, he actually was immediately shot at. And the suspect, which later turned out to be the Zodiac Killer, fired many rounds into Mike's body, including Darlene. Darlene was actually expired at the scene when police did arrive a short time later. Mike actually survived his injuries that night, albeit with not some, debilitating physical after effects of that night. But in true fashion of the Zodiac Killer, he sent taunting letters claiming ownership and responsibility for the crime that night. But it's the second canonical crime of the Zodiac Killer in Vallejo. And as you can see now, it's a park that's been built up over the years, although it's not that much different than when it was in 1969. But a part of the Zodiac history that, again, much like Lake Berryessa, if I may be so honest, is, again, a rather sprawling, quiet, inviting, warm environment. But for the uninitiated, they would never really know that right in this very spot, one of the crime sites of one of the most famous, if not the most famous, unsolved murder spree in American history took place. So, hey, there's no water here. What do they mean, no fishing? I just want to point out one of the creepiest aspects of the Blue Rock Springs murder that night. So again, just imagine yourself, you're in your car, it's pitch black in the middle of what was at that time an unincorporated lover's lane of the city of Vallejo. And you drive here with your date, whomever your romantic partner, you park your car, it's pitch black out here. And you park your car, and all of a sudden a car just tears out from the main road, parks up alongside yours, turns its lights off, and just idles there. It's just even saying it makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Truly scary stuff. And then to have that car leave, then come back moments later and carry out, a grisly crime like that is just incredibly unsettling and terrifying. But that part of it really just really kind of scares me, and kind of really just highlights how incredibly awful these crimes were, and sinister and premeditated at that. So with the put my seatbelt on. You guys always forget to do that like me? Oh, not forget, I just kind of just don't do it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably do that. So the Blue Rock Springs murder, that Michael Maggio survived, and his date that night, or the girl he was dating, who was Darlene Ferrin, she actually was married at the time. She actually had a newborn child, I think that was less than a year old, or I believe so. And she was actually married to her husband, Dean. And they had this sort of odd relationship where her husband, Dean, knew that Darlene had been pretty much dating other men. Their marriage was crumbling and falling apart. And Darlene was she was sort of a really gregarious type individual. And she was friends with a lot of people. And I needed to turn there, and looks like we're going back on the freeway. So you know what? Say what you want about... Oh, fuck. God damn it. Son of a bitch. So, Dean, the husband, and it makes sense because most, especially violent crimes, which includes murder, they will always look to the significant other, the spouse, first. Because most violent crime is committed by someone that knows you. And since Dean was her husband, and they had this rather very weird relationship, or at least one that wasn't very normal for the time, and maybe not even normal now, it looked a little suspicious to police that Dean, although he was unaware of that specific person that Darlene had been seeing that night, he was aware that his wife, he didn't like hearing this, but he was aware that his wife was essentially seeing other people. So, but Dean was not responsible. He had an airtight alibi. He was working that night. Him and his wife worked at the same restaurant, which is no longer here in Vallejo. But at the time, it was actually a pretty well-known restaurant/diner. And we're getting a lot of mean mugs over here. I think it's the camera, actually.
Sure.
The camera has been sort of really putting us on this... it's almost like, you know how when you would flick on if you guys had one of these, when you'd flick on that those lightning bug zappers, where all of a sudden they all just would be attracted to it. It's kind of feel like what this light is, or this camera. But I want to say something about that, but I'm not going to. All right, guys, so we are here back in the city of Vallejo, and in around this intersection is where a phone booth once stood. That phone booth was used by the Zodiac Killer, who called the police after killing the two young adults at Blue Rock Springs back in September 1969. He called the City of Vallejo Police Department and claimed responsibility both for that murder, which he had committed just merely an hour beforehand, and then it also said that he had killed those two teenagers last year in 1968, which was on Lake Herman Road. He tauntingly said goodbye to the voice operator for the police department and hung up the phone. Apparently, and according to multiple people that heard his voice, he spoke in a monotone and was seemingly like he was reading a script. That recording that he placed to the officer that night has been lost. The police have said they are not able to find it, which is, I don't know what to think about that. That's kind of, I don't know if that's telling or if that's just the way things happen with crimes that have happened, this case nearly 60 years ago. As it relates to any potential suspects for this crime, the only named suspect in the Zodiac Killer case was a man by the name of Arthur Lee Allen, who was actually a resident and citizen of the city of Vallejo. He had a connection to almost all of the crimes and was actually investigated heavily by police, both in San Francisco and locally. And unfortunately, at least fortunately for him, no charges were ever formally filed against him because there was always evidence that either exonerated him or wasn't nearly enough to convict him or charge him. And he is the only official suspect in this case. We're here at Lake Herman Road. As you can see, it's a back road in a country-like atmosphere of Benicia and Vallejo. This road actually connects both sister towns. And right here, we're on and around where my car is parked. On December 20th, 1968, the first confirmed Zodiac murder took place of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, who were both 16 and 17 respectively. They were teenagers. And they had parked their car 5 days short of Christmas Day right here shortly after 9 p.m. And what would have been, and like it is now, a very quiet, rural, countryside back road where there is still no lights of any kind, and it would have been pitch black out here. And it was a lover's lane in those days where teenagers, young adults would park here and do what teenagers and young people do. And on that night, they parked their car here and a car parked behind them. And this suspect unloaded a round of bullets into the vehicle, striking both David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. They ran from the car after being initially shot at. David actually managed to be taken to the hospital where he arrived, dead on arrival. Betty, unfortunately, died at her injuries on the site here, where her body actually was found with her back, with 5 bullet holes shot in the back as she tried to run away from the Zodiac Killer. But during the day, it still has that mystifying quality to it, despite its, again, warm, open country atmosphere. So on that December night in 1968, investigators had documented, after investigations with eyewitnesses and interviewing a lot of people that may have been or may not have been involved in this particular crime, the officers who were present that night and who led the investigation here on Lake Herman Road accounted for only 6 minutes where there wasn't an eyewitness present and where there wasn't anyone driving that said they saw nothing afoot. But for those 6 minutes, that's when David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were happened upon by the Zodiac Killer, who ultimately and unfortunately took their lives. But it's just kind of really crazy to think that in 6 minutes, that person happened upon those two teenagers parked here innocently enjoying their lives and parked up alongside them, committed that crime and took off into the night. And no one saw or heard anything. It's crazy to think about. Just 6 minutes. We are ending our journey here with the Zodiac Killer case, ending in where it all began, here on Lake Herman Road all those years ago, nearly 60 years ago. Here on Lake Herman Road, on a back country road, and sort of like a lot of the sites that we visited for this case, this site as well, especially during the day, is warm, unassuming, open, and despite all of the atmosphere and majesty and the beauty of the natural just plains and hills we see here, it is just incredibly, the way it pairs with one of the most enduring mysteries in American crime history. In this case, the Zodiac Killer, probably the most famous unsolved murder crime spree in American history, one could even argue the world over. And just even standing here, what is probably mere feet from where two young individuals lost their lives that December night, it really just, it fills you with this sort of immense feeling of compassion and wanting to reach out and like sort of the pool of history to want to help. And sort of what inspires Johnny and myself to want to do episodes and stories like this is to sort of bridge that gap where we can not only see this for ourselves, but try to connect with something that is decades, in the past that we weren't even around for. And for the people that lived at that time, the detectives, the family members, the surviving victims in some cases, it's just a way for us to connect with that despite having not experienced it ourselves. And just again, standing here, it was full circle. And it was kind of interesting that I wanted this site, despite it being the first one, to be the last one that we visited. It just feels appropriate, oddly. But I'll never forget this. Johnny will never forget this. And I'd like to say something more profound than I have, but I think I pretty much summed up what we feel here today. But yeah, this will stay with me forever. So, yeah. All right, guys, man, what an episode. We stuffed this Christmas stocking full for a big, fat Halloween episode for you guys, and it was a lot of work, but a lot of fun. It's just incredible being out here, but anyway, actually, before I forget, we actually chose this spot for kind of like this wrap up because our hotel is not far from this location. In fact, it's right there, but that symbol on that little facade behind me, it is actually, it is the Zodiac symbol. I mean, at least that was, it's a very fast and loose version of it, but it's eerily accurate to what the Zodiac Killer used and put on all of his, written missives to the police, taunting them. And it's kind of crazy that it's in this very town where he, started. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this episode. It was just a kind of what inceptualized lo-fi for Johnny and I. We started with this, but we wanted to make sure that we really did it when we knew what we were kind of doing. And it's just kind of amazing that we're doing it. And anyway, it was so much fun. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please tell us if you liked it in the comments below. Please consider subscribing, and we'll see you guys in the next Lo-Fi. Are you subscribed yet?